The pills rattled softly in my palm. Two small white circles that had become my morning ritual. Marcus stood over me, his smile gentle, his tone soothing, the picture of a devoted husband. Just take your medicine, Olivia. You know how anxious you get. His eyes never left me as I lifted the glass to my lips. I swallowed under his watch, throat tight, stomach knotted. The world around me, the tidy kitchen, the faint smell of brewed coffee, the sunlight on polished countertops, felt like a stage where I played the role of fragile wife. But behind my trembling hands, a question gnawed at me. Was he saving me or destroying me? I wasn't always like this. There was a time when my mornings began with sketch paper spread across the dining table, my favorite mechanical pencil in hand, and music humming softly from the radio. I used to design buildings. Homes that held laughter, offices that carried ambition, libraries that promised quiet refuge. My work was about space, about creating balance between walls and windows, between light and shadow. Now my world had shrunk to this house. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked steadily as I sat there, waiting for Marcus to leave for work. He kissed my forehead before heading out, the gesture meant to feel tender, though it only made my skin crawl. His cologne lingered long after the door closed, sharp, clean, clinical. I waited until I heard his car pull away before moving. My steps were unsteady, the tiles cold beneath my bare feet. In the bathroom, the mirror reflected someone I barely recognized. My skin, once warm with color, had turned pale. My dark hair hung lifeless, and deep shadows bruised the skin beneath my eyes. Clothes that once fit comfortably now slipped off my shoulders. I gripped the sink and whispered to the hollow-eyed woman staring back at me. "What's happening to you?" But I already knew. 6 months ago, life looked different. I had my office downtown, a small but thriving practice. I spent long hours with clients, walking them through models, listening to their hopes for spaces that would hold their families and dreams. I loved those moments, watching their eyes light up as the sketches became real possibilities. I had friends then too. Emma, my college roommate, who still called me Liv, no matter how grown-up we pretended to be. Friday evenings were ours. Wine, takeout, gossip about the week. My parents visited often, proud of their daughter who had carved a place for herself in the city. And Marcus? Well, Marcus was different then. He was charming, attentive, always ready with solutions. He liked to say that together we were a perfect balance, his practicality and my creativity. But little by little, his solutions became restrictions. "You work too hard, Liv. Why don't you start taking more projects from home? You should rest more. Stress is bad for your health. Don't you think Emma is a bit of a bad influence, always dragging you out?" At first, I thought he was protecting me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was burning out. It felt flattering to have someone so concerned about me, someone willing to shoulder the burden when I faltered. But concern became control. And control became confinement. The first time I forgot a meeting, I laughed it off. The second time, Marcus frowned, telling me I was too anxious, too scattered. By the third, I was crying in the stairwell of my own office, convinced I was losing my mind. That was when he introduced the pills. "They'll help with the anxiety," he said, his voice so warm, so convincing. He was a pharmacist. If anyone knew what would help, it had to be him. I trusted him. I should have trusted myself. Because now mornings were no longer mine. They belonged to Marcus, to the pills, to the slow dizziness that crawled through my veins an hour later, leaving me weak and confused. Still, a part of me clung to who I used to be. The Olivia who designed skylines, who laughed with Emma, who dreamed of building something lasting. Somewhere under the poison, she still breathed. And she wanted out. The first time I felt the ground tilt beneath me, I was standing in the middle of my office, a client's blueprint spread across the desk. My pen slipped from my hand, and the lines blurred as though the paper had been doused in water. I pressed my palms against the cool wood, waiting for the dizziness to pass. Marcus's voice echoed in my mind. "You've been overworking yourself again." Maybe he was right. Maybe this was just exhaustion. That night, I mentioned it to him at dinner. "I felt faint today. In the office." My hands wouldn't stop shaking. He looked up from his plate, fork paused midair, concern etched across his face. "Liv, this is exactly what I've been worried about. Your anxiety is getting worse." Anxiety. I frowned. I didn't feel anxious, just, he reached across, laying his hand over mine. His touch was steady, warm, persuasive. Trust me. It's stress. I see it all the time at the pharmacy. That's why I started you on the pills. They'll help. His confidence washed over me like a tide, erasing my doubts. Who was I to argue with his medical knowledge? But 2 weeks later, my doubts returned. Emma and I had planned dinner, a rare night out. I dressed carefully, slipping into a navy blouse that used to make me feel sharp and professional. The mirror reflected a thinner version of myself, but I brushed off the unease. Tonight, I wanted to feel normal again. At the restaurant, Emma's eyes widened. Liv, are you okay? You look pale. I'm fine, I said quickly, forcing a smile. Just tired. Work's been intense. But halfway through our meal, my fork slipped from my fingers. My hands trembled so badly I had to grip the table edge to steady myself. Emma reached across, worry shadowing her expression. This isn't just stress. Have you seen a doctor? The words caught in my throat. Marcus was my doctor, in his way. He monitored my pills, reminded me when to take them, explained every symptom away. I shook my head, unwilling to voice the truth even to her. I'm okay, I lied. Marcus is taking care of me. But when I returned home that night, Marcus's reaction unsettled me. Instead of asking how dinner went, he asked, "Did you tell Emma about your medication?" The intensity in his eyes chilled me. No, I whispered. Good. His smile was quick, but it didn't reach his eyes. People don't always understand these things. Best to keep it between us. That was realization number 1. The creeping suspicion that something about his concern wasn't genuine. The second realization came sharper, crueler. It was late one night when I woke to the sound of Marcus in the kitchen. The soft clink of glass, the scrape of a chair. Curious, I slipped out of bed and padded down the hall. From the doorway, I watched him empty powder from a small vial into my orange pill bottle, his movements precise, practiced. Marcus. My voice cracked. He spun, startled, then forced a smile. Couldn't sleep. Just checking your dosage. Pharmacist habit. But my skin prickled. Something inside me whispered, that isn't habit. That's hiding. The next morning, I studied the pills more closely. They looked ordinary, identical. But ordinary pills didn't make my hair fall out in clumps in the shower. Ordinary pills didn't make food taste like metal, or my legs buckle beneath me without warning. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers. But every time I opened my mouth, his voice smothered mine. Don't be paranoid, Liv. You're imagining things. This is your illness talking, not reality. And slowly, terrifyingly, even I began to wonder if he was right. One evening, I stumbled on the stairs, hitting the hardwood with a thud. My ankle throbbed as Marcus rushed to my side. See, he said, his voice low, soothing as though to a child. You can't trust yourself anymore. That's why you need me. The words lodged in my chest like shards of glass. Because that was the second realization, the crushing one. Marcus didn't want me healthy. He wanted me dependent, fragile, controlled. And he had everyone else convinced too. When I tried to explain to my mother, she sighed over the phone. Sweetheart, Marcus just wants what's best. You've always been a little dramatic. Even Emma stopped pressing after Marcus told her, behind my back, that I was struggling with episodes. I was trapped in a carefully constructed cage, its bars invisible but unbreakable. And worst of all, I had helped build it, one pill at a time. The morning it all shifted, the kitchen smelled of burnt toast. Marcus was already dressed for work, tie knotted neatly, hair combed into perfection. I sat at the table, staring at the pills he'd placed beside my orange juice. Go on, he said softly, watching me. Always watching. But something inside me rebelled. My throat was raw from a night of vomiting, my skin clammy, my reflection in the mirror a ghost I hardly recognized. I picked up the pills, hesitated, then set them back down. Not today, I whispered. His smile faltered. Olivia, don't start this. I need a break. Maybe my body needs rest, not medicine. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm, careful. This isn't up for debate. You're not capable of making these decisions anymore. You need me to guide you. I felt heat rising in my chest, anger, rare and dangerous. Guide me or control me? The silence stretched. His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I saw the mask slip. Then just as quickly it was back. He pushed the pills closer. Take them. Don't make me worry. But I didn't. Later that week, Emma invited me to a small gathering at her apartment. Marcus insisted on driving me, hovering as though I were fragile porcelain. I forced a smile as he introduced me to Emma's friends, his arm looped protectively around my shoulders. To them, we must have looked like the perfect couple. But then he said it, the insult that cracked the last of my restraint. She's been struggling, poor thing, Marcus told the group, his voice warm, sympathetic. Some days she forgets where she puts things. I found her keys in the freezer last week. Laughter rippled through the room. Emma's eyes darted to mine, unsure. My cheeks burned. I had never put my keys in the freezer. He had planted that story, painting me as scatterbrained, unstable. And the worst part? Everyone believed him. I excused myself, locking the bathroom door. My hands shook as I braced against the sink. The face in the mirror stared back at me, pale, thin, defeated. That was the moment I knew. If I didn't act, Marcus would erase me completely. The very next day, while he worked a late shift at the pharmacy, I gathered what little courage I had left. I slipped on a coat, tucked my hair into a scarf, and walked 3 blocks to a small clinic far from our neighborhood. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and coffee. A television murmured in the corner. My legs trembled as I filled out the intake form, hesitating at the question. Reason for visit. My pen scratched slowly. Unexplained illness. Suspicion of poisoning. Even writing it made me feel half crazy. When the nurse, a kind woman with gray streaks in her hair, called me in, I blurted everything. The dizziness, the hair loss, the pills Marcus insisted I take. My words tumbled out, messy and desperate. She listened quietly, eyes narrowing, then said, "We'll run a full blood panel today. If something's wrong, it will show up." Her tone was firm, grounding me. For the first time in months, I felt like someone believed me. That night, Marcus asked no questions about where I'd been. He assumed, as always, that I had nowhere else to turn. But in the quiet of my locked bedroom, I clutched the bandage on my arm where the nurse had drawn blood, as though it were a shield. Days later, the phone call came. "Olivia." The nurse's voice was careful, measured. "Your blood work shows highly elevated levels of thallium." I sat frozen, the room spinning. Thallium. It's a toxic metal. Very dangerous, especially in long-term exposure. "I need you to come in immediately." And her voice dropped lower. "We'll need to notify the authorities." The truth sliced through me, sharp and cold. I hadn't been imagining things. Marcus wasn't saving me. He was poisoning me day after day. I hung up, pressing the phone to my chest, my breath coming fast and shallow. For so long, I had doubted myself, let his words bend my reality. But now, I had proof. Solid, undeniable proof. And with it, something new stirred in me. Not just fear, but fire. Marcus thought he had me trapped, silenced, erased. But he had underestimated the strength of a woman with nothing left to lose. Sleep abandoned me after the nurse's call. I lay in bed with the curtains half drawn, the streetlight outside throwing pale bars across the ceiling. Beside me, Marcus breathed in steady rhythm, a counterfeit calm. Each exhale reminded me. He was the reason my veins carried poison. I stared at the shadows until my eyes burned. My thoughts looped endlessly. Why me? Why would he do this? How long has it been happening? Once or twice, I sat up, ready to shake him awake and scream the truth in his face. But fear pressed me back down. If I confronted him now, without a plan, he'd find a way to twist it, to silence me again. By dawn, I slipped quietly out of bed and wrapped myself in a blanket on the living room couch. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I curled into the fabric, my body aching, my mind racing. Memories returned in fragments, sharper now with context. The first time he handed me a pill, smiling as he said, "This will help live." The way he watched me swallow, his eyes too intent. The faint metallic taste in my mouth after meals. The clumps of hair in the shower drain. Pieces that hadn't made sense before now aligned into a single, horrifying picture. Marcus had been killing me slowly, and smiling while he did it. I pressed my hands to my face, biting back a sob. Anger rose, mingled with grief, with betrayal so deep it made my chest ache. I had trusted him with my life, and he had weaponized that trust against me. For days, I lived in a fog of half-formed plans. Should I run? Should I pack a bag and disappear? But where would I go? He had convinced my family and friends I was unstable. Who would believe me if I simply accused him? The nurse's words echoed in my head. We'll need to notify the authorities. Authorities. The very word filled me with equal parts relief and terror. If Marcus suspected I had spoken to anyone, he could accelerate whatever poison he used. I could be gone before help arrived. On the third night, I found myself pacing the kitchen floor, my bare feet cold against the tiles. I whispered to myself, words spilling out like a mantra. You're not crazy. You're not weak. He did this. I opened the cabinet where the pill bottle sat, orange plastic glowing faintly in the dim light. My hand hovered over it. Then slowly, deliberately, I screwed the cap shut and placed it back on the shelf without taking one. That small act felt monumental, a rebellion, a reclaiming. My body trembled, but my mind sharpened. I wasn't going to let Marcus dictate the rest of my story. The next morning, my reflection in the mirror startled me. My face was gaunt, eyes hollow, but there was something new in them, a glimmer of defiance. At breakfast, Marcus slid the pills across the table as usual. I met his eyes, forcing my voice steady. I'll take them later, I said. He studied me for a long moment, suspicion flickering. Then he smiled too quickly. Of course. I carried that moment with me all day, holding it close. It was proof that I could still outmaneuver him, even in small ways. That night, I sat in bed with a notebook, my hands shaking as I wrote down every symptom, every strange incident, every word Marcus had said. A record. Evidence. My handwriting wavered, but the page filled steadily. When exhaustion finally dragged me under, it wasn't peaceful. My dreams were crowded with images. Marcus pouring powder into my glass, Marcus standing over me with that tender, deceitful smile. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat. But instead of curling inward, I swung my legs over the bed and whispered into the dark. No more. The decision crystallized in me like ice forming on glass. I would go back to the clinic. I would hand over my notes. I would tell the authorities everything, even if my voice shook. If Marcus wanted me silent, he had underestimated one truth. Survival has its own kind of fury, and I wasn't done surviving yet. The clinic waiting room looked different the second time, less like a place for healing, more like a threshold. My legs trembled as I clutched the notebook I had filled over sleepless nights. Dates. Symptoms. Marcus's words. Everything I could remember. When the nurse called my name, I followed her down the narrow hall. My chest tightened with every step. In the small exam room, the doctor, a middle-aged man with sharp glasses and tired eyes, studied my file. Olivia, he began gently, the thallium levels in your blood are not accidental. This is deliberate poisoning. The words struck like a hammer, both terrifying and validating. My knees weakened, and I sank into the chair. He continued, we've contacted the FBI. Thallium is not easy to obtain, and given your husband's profession, he will be a person of interest. But we'll need more from you. Testimony, cooperation. Testimony. The word made me shiver. Speaking out meant stepping fully into danger. I nodded anyway. I'll do it. The first meeting with the FBI happened in a plain office with humming fluorescent lights. Agent Ramirez, a woman with calm eyes and a clipped tone, slid a recorder across the table. Start from the beginning, she said. I told them everything. How Marcus introduced the pills, how my symptoms worsened, how he painted me as unstable to friends and family. My voice cracked more than once, but Ramirez didn't interrupt. She only nodded, scribbling notes. When I finished, silence hung heavy. Finally, Ramirez leaned forward. Mrs. Green, your account aligns with certain suspicions we've had. Your husband may be connected to other unexplained deaths. We've been watching him, but your testimony could make the case stronger. The room tilted again. Not from poison this time, but from shock. Other deaths? I wasn't his first? I gripped the arms of the chair. What do you need me to do? At home, life became a careful performance. Marcus's eyes followed me, searching for cracks. I forced myself to smile, to swallow orange juice without pills, to move through the days as though nothing had changed. Every secret phone call with Agent Ramirez felt like walking a tightrope. I'd slip into the bathroom whispering updates. Yes, the pills are still on the counter. Yes, he watches me take them. No, he hasn't noticed I've stopped. Each call left me shaky, adrenaline pumping. One mistake, and Marcus would know. But setbacks came quickly. One afternoon, Emma stopped by unannounced. She stood in the doorway, her smile faltering when she saw me. Liv, you look awful. Has Marcus? Before she could finish, Marcus appeared at my shoulder, arm slipping around my waist. She's making progress, he said smoothly. But recovery takes time. Anxiety doesn't heal overnight. Emma's expression hardened. For a heartbeat, I thought she might challenge him. But then she just nodded, stepping back. I wanted to scream, don't leave. Don't believe him. But fear sealed my lips. When she was gone, Marcus's smile vanished. He gripped my arm, fingers digging in. Careful what you share. People don't understand our situation. That night, I lay awake, tears hot on my cheeks. I was supposed to be building strength, but instead, Marcus still held the power to silence me with one look. Weeks dragged on. The FBI requested I gather physical evidence. Pill bottles, receipts, anything linking Marcus to the poison. The thought of snooping terrified me, but I forced myself forward. One evening, while Marcus showered, I crept into his home office. The room smelled faintly of paper and coffee. My hands shook as I pulled open drawers. Invoices, medical journals, patient notes, and then at the bottom of a file a receipt. My breath caught. A chemical order slip, dated months earlier, listing thallium salts. I slipped it into my pocket just as the water shut off upstairs. My pulse pounded as I slid the drawer closed and returned to the kitchen, heart hammering. When Marcus entered moments later, towel draped around his neck, he studied me. Everything all right? Fine, I said, forcing my voice even. But my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I tucked them under the table, praying he didn't notice. The next morning, I delivered the receipt to Agent Ramirez in the parking lot of a grocery store. She examined it, her jaw tightening. This is exactly what we needed, she said. We'll be moving soon. But Olivia, you need to stay strong. He will sense the walls closing in. Her warning proved true. Marcus grew more watchful. His questions sharpened. Where were you this afternoon? Why were you late coming home? Who were you talking to on the phone? I dodged, deflected, but his suspicion thickened like smoke. One night, as I rinsed dishes, he came up behind me. His breath was hot against my ear. You know I'd never hurt you, right? His voice was low, almost tender. Everything I do is for your own good. I froze, plate slipping in my soapy hands. Did he suspect? Or was it another manipulation, another twist of the knife? I mumbled, I know, and forced myself to keep scrubbing. Inside, terror and fury burned side by side. The setback that almost broke me came a week later. The FBI arranged surveillance near our home, but Marcus was clever. He noticed the unfamiliar car parked down the street. That evening, he confronted me, his eyes sharp as blades. Have you been talking to someone? A doctor? The police? My mouth went dry. Of course not. Why would I? He studied me for a long time, then smiled, cold and thin. Good. Because if you ever betrayed me, Olivia, it wouldn't end well. I held his gaze, forcing myself not to flinch. Inside, my pulse thundered. That night, I almost packed a bag and ran. But the notebook lay open on my desk, filled with months of entries, proof of his lies, his poison, his control. I couldn't leave it unfinished. If I disappeared, Marcus would find someone else. Another woman, another victim. I had to stay. I had to finish this. The next day, I called Ramirez. My voice was hoarse, but steady. I'm ready. Whatever comes next, I'm ready. And for the first time, I believed it. The morning of the arrest was ordinary on the surface. The kitchen smelled of coffee, Sunlight spilled across the counter, and Marcus hummed as he buttered toast. To anyone else, it would have looked like a peaceful marriage. Inside, I was a storm. The FBI had set the time. Agents waited down the block, unmarked cars blending with the quiet street. All I had to do was keep Marcus calm until the knock came. He slid my medicine toward me. "Don't forget," he said warmly, watching. My hand hovered over the glass. I forced a small smile, my heart hammering. "Later." His eyes narrowed, but before he could speak, the doorbell rang. He frowned. "This early?" When he opened the door, the scene shifted in a heartbeat. 2 agents stepped inside, their voices firm, badges flashing. "Marcus Green? FBI. You're under arrest for attempted murder by poisoning, among other charges." The world tilted. Marcus froze, confusion flashing across his face before morphing into a practiced smile. "There must be some mistake," he said smoothly. "I'm a pharmacist. I help people." Agent Ramirez stepped forward, her expression unyielding. "We have evidence of thallium purchases traced to you, toxicology reports from your wife, and receipts linking you to other suspicious cases. You need to come with us." The mask cracked. For the first time, I saw panic in his eyes. He turned toward me. "Olivia, tell them. Tell them you're sick, that you've been confused. They'll believe you." My throat closed. For years, I had played the role he assigned me, fragile, unreliable, dependent. But not today. I lifted my chin, my voice trembling but clear. "No, Marcus. I'm not confused. You did this to me. And now everyone knows." The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Marcus's smile collapsed. His shoulders sagged as the agents cuffed him, reading his rights. He didn't fight, not physically. But his eyes burned into me, a promise of venom. "You'll regret this," he hissed as they led him away. The door closed behind them, and the house fell still. The fallout came quickly. Reporters circled like vultures, headlines flashing. "Respected pharmacist arrested for poisoning wife." Neighbors gawked, whispering as I stepped outside. Some faces held sympathy, others doubt. But Emma was there, waiting at the curb. She rushed to me, pulling me into her arms. "Liv, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have believed you sooner." Tears stung my eyes. I almost didn't believe myself. The courtroom months later was a different kind of stage. Marcus sat at the defense table, suit crisp, expression carefully blank. He avoided my eyes. When it was my turn to testify, my legs trembled as I approached the stand. The room smelled of old wood and paper, the air heavy with expectation. I told my story, the pills, the symptoms, the lies. My voice wavered, but each word felt like a stone laid in place, building something stronger than fear. The defense tried to paint me as unstable, but the blood tests, the receipts, the FBI investigation stood taller than any accusation. Piece by piece, the truth held. When the verdict came, guilty on multiple counts, I sat frozen, barely breathing. Marcus's face remained unreadable, but I caught the flicker in his eyes. Disbelief that he had been outmaneuvered. The gavel struck, final and sharp. Afterward, Ramirez found me in the hallway. "You did more than save yourself," she said quietly. "Your testimony helped connect him to 2 other deaths we'd been investigating. Families finally have answers." Her words sank in slowly, like sunlight warming cold skin. For so long, I had felt powerless, invisible. Now I had helped stop him. It didn't erase the scars, but it gave them meaning. That night, I returned home to a silence that no longer felt suffocating. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, just as it always had, but it was different now. The shadows on the walls belonged to me again. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty space on the counter where the pill bottle used to sit. My hands shook, but not from poison. From relief. From release. For the first time in years, I took a deep breath and let it fill me completely. Marcus was gone. And I was still here. The trial ended, but silence followed me everywhere. For weeks, I woke expecting to hear Marcus's voice drifting from the kitchen, the clink of mugs, the low hum of his morning routine. Instead, there was only the creak of the house settling and the distant sound of birds outside. At first, the silence unnerved me. It felt hollow, unfinished, like a play cut off mid-scene. But slowly, I began to see it differently. Not emptiness, but space. I filled it with small rituals of my own. Mornings started with black coffee, no pills lined up on the counter. I opened the windows wide, letting in fresh air that smelled of wet grass and car exhaust. Sometimes I played the radio low, just for the company of voices. I returned to sketching, my pencils gathering dust for years. At first, my hands were stiff, my lines uneven. But soon the pages filled with shapes, buildings, pieces of a world I thought I'd lost. One afternoon, Emma stopped by. She carried flowers in a mason jar and a hesitant smile. "How are you really?" she asked, setting them on my table. I thought about lying, about saying I was fine. Instead, I said, "Some days I feel free. Some days I feel broken. Most days both." She squeezed my hand. "That sounds like healing." The community had its whispers. Some avoided me at the grocery store, eyes darting as if I carried his guilt with me. Others leaned in too eagerly, hungry for details. But there were also strangers who reached out quietly. A woman in line at the pharmacy slipped me a note. "I went through something similar. Thank you for speaking out." I kept that note tucked in my wallet. Proof that my story mattered beyond survival. 1 year later, I stood at the edge of a small auditorium, hands trembling as I held a stack of papers. The local women's center had asked me to speak. I almost said no. The thought of reliving it aloud made my stomach twist. But then I remembered the woman at the pharmacy, and the quiet faces in the courtroom who needed to hear that survival was possible. When I stepped to the microphone, the room smelled faintly of coffee and paper handouts. The lights made the air feel hot. My voice shook at first, but I told them the truth. How easily love can disguise danger. How silence can grow heavier than chains. How trusting your instincts, even when no one else does, can save your life. I looked out and saw heads nodding, eyes shining. For the first time, my pain wasn't just mine. It was a bridge. That evening, I walked home beneath a wide sky streaked pink and orange. The air carried the scent of blooming jasmine, sharp and sweet. I paused at my front door, feeling the rough brass of the key in my hand. This house, once a prison, now felt like mine again. Inside, I lit a candle on the kitchen counter. Its flame flickered softly, a small thing but steady. I sat down with my sketchbook, pencil in hand, and began to draw, not buildings this time, but a horizon. Something open. Something endless. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was slow, layered, like skin knitting over a wound. There were nights when fear still crept in, when a knock at the door made my pulse race, when I woke gasping from dreams of him slipping powder into my glass. But there were also mornings when sunlight spilled across my floor and I felt, finally, that I belonged to myself again. Healing wasn't a finish line. It was a choice every day to keep moving forward. And every day, I chose me. Sometimes I wonder how many times I almost died without knowing it. How many mornings I swallowed what I thought was care, only to feel my body weaken under his hand. That question used to keep me awake at night. But now, it doesn't hold me the same way. Because I lived. And because I saw the truth, even when no one else wanted to believe it. When people ask what survival feels like, I don't talk about the trial, or the headlines, or even the moment Marcus was led away in handcuffs. Survival, to me, is quieter than that. It's the sound of the kettle whistling in my own kitchen. It's walking into a doctor's office without fear. It's sketching until the page is full, then starting again. It's learning that my strength was never about being unbreakable. It was about choosing to rebuild, piece by piece, even with the cracks showing. One evening not long ago, I sat on my porch as the sky deepened into twilight. The air smelled of cut grass, and the faint smoke of someone's barbecue down the street. I watched as the first stars appeared, tiny pinpricks of light against the dark. And I thought, that's me. Not the blazing sun, not a fire that consumes everything. Just one steady point of light, small but certain, refusing to disappear. If I could speak to the woman I was then, the one swallowing pills in silence, doubting her own mind, I would tell her this. You are not weak for loving. You are not foolish for trusting. But you are stronger than you believe for surviving. And if I could speak to anyone still living in that quiet prison of doubt and fear, I would tell them, listen to your body. Listen to your instincts. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how carefully it's buried. My life now is not perfect, not free of shadows. But it is mine. And when I wake in the morning, stretch my arms, and breathe in the clean air through an open window, I know this. He poisoned my body. But he did not poison my spirit. And that spirit, scarred but unbroken, is what carries me forward.